I still remember the way my hands trembled as I held the bouquet, not from excitement, but from the unbearable silence that filled the church. Every seat was taken except for two, the ones reserved for my parents. Their names were written in gold ink on ivory cards, perfectly placed, perfectly untouched. My throat burned as I tried to swallow the truth. They weren't coming. The music played softly, but every note felt hollow. Guests whispered, some pretending not to notice the empty chairs that stood out like open wounds. My fiancé, Ethan, squeezed my hand, trying to anchor me, but even his warmth couldn't thaw the ache spreading through my chest. I told myself for weeks that maybe they'd surprise me, that they'd walk in at the last moment and everything would be okay. But as the priest began the ceremony, I realized the surprise was mine. They really didn't care enough to show up. When I said my vows, my voice cracked. Not because I doubted my love for Ethan, but because I could feel my parents' absence echoing through every word. It wasn't the first time they'd chosen pride over love, but it was the last time I'd let them hurt me without consequence. After the ceremony, people congratulated me, took photos, and raised glasses. Laughter filled the air, but I was somewhere else entirely, watching the door, imagining what excuse they might have. My maid of honor, Lila, hugged me tightly and whispered, "You don't need them to validate your happiness." I nodded, pretending to believe her. But deep down, a small part of me still ached for a mother's hug, a father's proud smile. Later that night, when the music faded and the guests were gone, I sat on the edge of the hotel bed in my wedding dress, makeup smeared, staring at my phone. No missed calls, no messages, just silence. My father had texted me the week before, "We can't come. Your mother isn't feeling well." That was it. No explanation, no apology. My mother's illness was nothing but discomfort. Discomfort that her daughter was marrying someone they didn't approve of because he wasn't from their circle. My parents had always measured love and status. When I was a little girl, I thought money made them powerful. Now I realized it made them hollow. They built their lives around appearances, fancy dinners, charity galas, and endless gossip about who had what. I used to think I'd do anything to earn their love. I was wrong. I'd done everything. I once took a year off college just to work and helped my dad save his business when it was sinking. I cashed out my small savings, borrowed money, and even lied to Ethan about why I couldn't afford our trip that year. I thought my father would be grateful, that maybe it would finally make him proud. But when his business recovered, he told people he did it, all on his own. He never even mentioned me. I swallowed that pain because family, I thought, was worth the sacrifice. But standing at my wedding, watching those empty chairs, something inside me snapped. The girl who once begged for her parents' approval died that day. In her place, a quiet fire was born, one that would fuel every decision I made from that moment on. Ethan saw it in my eyes as we danced our first dance. "You're thinking about them," he murmured. I nodded. "I just can't understand how they could stay away." He kissed my forehead gently, then stopped trying to understand. "Some people only love you when they can control you." His words landed like a truth I'd known all along but never dared to admit. That night, after Ethan fell asleep, I opened my laptop and began writing the business plan I'd been too scared to pursue. An idea I'd once pitched to my father and been laughed at for. "Stick to your job, sweetheart," he'd said. "You're not a businesswoman." I typed through tears, determination sharpening every keystroke. I promised myself that one day they would regret underestimating me. The world didn't owe me recognition, but my parents did. And if I couldn't have their love, I would have something even better. Success so loud that their silence would become deafening. When the morning came, I looked out the window and saw the sun spilling over the horizon. It should have been a new beginning with Ethan, but in my heart, it was something else, the start of a reckoning. Years later, that reckoning would arrive in the form of a gleaming silver Porsche, parked right in front of the house that once made me feel small. But on my wedding night, I couldn't see that far ahead. All I could see were two empty chairs, and the promise that one day they'd wish they hadn't left them that way. That night, I didn't cry for them. I cried for the version of me that still believed they'd ever come. Success, they say, is the best revenge, but they never tell you how lonely it feels when the people you wanted to prove wrong are the very ones who were supposed to love you first. After the wedding, I buried myself in work. I was determined to turn my business plan, an online luxury interior design service, into something real. Ethan supported me unconditionally, but there were nights when I'd stay up till dawn, tears mixing with caffeine and frustration, wondering why my parents' voices still echoed in my head. My father's cold dismissals. My mother's sighs of disappointment. Every doubt they ever planted became fuel. I didn't want to prove them wrong anymore. I wanted to prove to myself that I could live without needing their approval. It wasn't easy. Investors turned me down, friends disappeared, and my savings dried up faster than I'd expected. I sold my wedding jewelry to pay for marketing. Ethan begged me not to, but I told him, "I'm not buying things, Ethan. I'm buying freedom." Still, deep down, I wondered if I was chasing validation, not from clients, but from ghosts. A year passed before I saw results. One viral post changed everything, a video tour of a client's remodeled home that caught the attention of a celebrity designer. Suddenly, I was flooded with inquiries, media requests, and partnerships. My company, Reverie Designs, grew faster than I could have imagined. But success came with a strange silence, the kind that reminds you something is missing. My parents never called, not even when I was featured in a magazine, smiling under the headline, "From Nothing to $1 Million Design." My mother's friends congratulated her at social events, assuming she was proud. She pretended to be. I heard about it from an old neighbor who texted me, "Your mom says she's so proud of your success. She must have been so supportive." I stared at that message for a long time, my heart twisting. She couldn't be proud of something she never believed in. Sometimes I drive by their mansion, the same one I grew up in, and sit across the street, watching from my car. I wasn't stalking them. I was searching for something I'd lost long ago. A sense of belonging. I'd see my father mowing the lawn, my mother tending to her roses, both perfectly content in their curated bubble. It was like I'd never existed. The truth was, they hadn't just ignored my wedding. They'd erased me. Flashbacks haunted me, moments I'd buried deep. Like the night I overheard my mother whisper to my father, "She's too sensitive, James. She'll never survive in the real world." I was 12, sitting on the staircase, clutching a drawing I'd made of our family. I wanted to show them, to hear them say it was beautiful. But after hearing that, I tore it to pieces before they could see. Or the time in college when I was struggling to pay rent, and I called my father in desperation. "Dad, I just need a little help. I promise I'll pay you back." He laughed softly and said, "If you can't handle your own bills, you shouldn't have moved out." Then he hung up. I sat on the cold dorm floor, surrounded by unpaid bills, and promised myself I'd never ask him for help again. Those memories didn't fade, they hardened me. But the pain also gave me clarity. My parents loved image, not people. Control, not connection. And when I stopped giving them both, they cut me off. Ethan used to tell me, "You can't fill an emotional void with achievements." Maybe he was right, but every milestone, every award, every new car, every deal signed, felt like another brick in the wall between me and them. The higher it got, the safer I felt. 3 years after my wedding, Reverie Designs became one of the most sought-after interior firms in the city. My clients were elite, my name was respected, and my bank account looked like something I used to dream about. That was when I bought it, the Porsche 911 Carrera S. It wasn't just a car, it was a symbol. A manifestation of every tear, every sleepless night, every "you can't" I had ever endured. But life has a cruel way of reminding you that even power can't silence the ache of abandonment. The day I drove the Porsche out of the dealership, I passed by my parents' house again, out of habit, maybe masochism. They were outside, talking to a neighbor. My father's eyes met mine as I slowed at the stop sign. For a brief moment, I saw something flicker across his face, recognition, then disbelief. My mother turned, her jaw tightening as she noticed the car. It wasn't until that night that my phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Sweetheart." My mother's voice, soft and trembling. "It's been so long." I froze. For 3 years, nothing. Now, suddenly, she remembered my number. I stayed silent. She continued, "Your father saw you today. Is that really your car?" There it was. The question that said everything. Not "how are you?" Not "we missed you." Just "is that yours?" I smiled bitterly. "Yes, Mom. It's mine." She paused. "We should have dinner soon, darling. Your father and I were just talking about how much we miss you." I almost laughed. The price of their silence had finally gone up, and they wanted to buy their way back into my life. I didn't give her an answer that night. I told her I'd think about it, but deep inside I already knew. I wasn't the same girl who sat crying on her wedding night. This time, I had something they wanted, and I was going to make sure they knew exactly what it felt like to be ignored. The next time they saw me, it wouldn't be from across the street. It would be face to face, and I'd let them see what silence had cost them. The first time I pulled up to my parents' house again, the sun was setting, that soft, golden light spilling across the neighborhood like a memory. The Porsche hummed beneath me, sleek, powerful, a quiet rebellion on four wheels. I hadn't been there in 3 years, not since they decided my wedding wasn't worth attending. But that evening, something inside me whispered it's time. As I rolled up the long driveway, I saw my mother through the front window. She froze, one hand still holding the curtain, the other covering her mouth. My father stepped outside moments later, his expression torn between pride and guilt. The irony almost made me laugh. The same man who once told me I'd never make it on my own was now staring at my $135,000 Porsche like it was a trophy he'd won. I turned off the engine and stepped out. The silence was thick, awkward, heavy with all the years we'd lost. My father forced a smile. "You look different," he said. "Successful." I replied. He chuckled, pretending to find it funny. "Of course. You've done well for yourself." My mother came out then, wearing her usual pearls, her perfume thick enough to fill the space between us. "Darling," she said softly, "we were just talking about you the other day. We're so proud." I looked at her carefully, searching her eyes for even a flicker of sincerity. There was none. Just calculation, the same kind she used whenever she wanted something. "Proud," I repeated slowly. "You didn't even show up to my wedding." Her smile faltered. "Sweetheart, you know how your father is about Ethan. We thought giving you space was best." "Space?" I said, laughing bitterly. "You call missing your only child's wedding giving space?" My father shifted uncomfortably. "It was a complicated time, Lily. We didn't want to make a scene. Besides, we heard you had a lovely ceremony." There it was again, the dismissal, the cold rewriting of history. They had a talent for twisting reality until it suited them. I stared at the house behind them, the same one I grew up in, the one that had felt like a museum of everything I was never good enough for. The manicured lawn, the spotless porch, the hollow perfection. "You only called after you saw my car," I said finally. My mother blinked. "That's not true." "It's exactly true," I said, voice steady. "You saw what I drive, and suddenly I'm worth remembering again." The words hung in the air like smoke. My father crossed his arms, defensive now. "You're being dramatic. We're family, Lily. We've always wanted what's best for you." I took a slow breath, fighting the surge of anger rising in my chest. "You wanted control, not what was best for me. You wanted obedience, not love." For the first time, my mother's composure cracked. "You don't understand what it's like being parents." "Actually," I interrupted, "I understand perfectly. You raised me to believe love had to be earned, that affection came with conditions. I spent years breaking myself to meet them, but now I see that the only approval I ever needed was my own." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. My father's face tightened, and for once I saw it, the shame he'd buried under arrogance. "We made mistakes," he said quietly. "We thought we were teaching you strength." I met his gaze, steady and unflinching. "You taught me strength, all right, just not the kind you meant to." My mother looked at the Porsche again, eyes glistening. "You've done so well," she said softly. "Maybe we could start over? Have dinner sometime. Your father and I have missed you." It would have been easier to believe her if she hadn't spent years pretending I didn't exist. I studied her, feeling that strange mix of sadness and detachment. "You missed the version of me who needed you," I said. "The one who begged for attention. That girl's gone." They stood there, speechless, and for the first time, I realized I held the power. Not because of the Porsche, not because of the success, but because I no longer needed their approval to breathe. I turned toward the car, ready to leave. But then, something in me hesitated. A part of me, the wounded child who used to watch them from the stairs, wanted closure. So I reached into my purse, pulled out an envelope, and handed it to my father. "What's this?" he asked. "An invitation," I said. "I'm hosting a gala next month. It's for a scholarship fund in my name, for students whose parents don't believe in them." My mother's eyes widened. "You're serious?" "Very," I said. "And you're welcome to come, if you can make it this time." Their expressions twisted with a mix of pride, discomfort, and regret. It was poetic. The people who once told me I'd never make it were now standing outside, staring at a daughter who had everything they claimed to value. I slipped back into the driver's seat, the leather cool against my skin. As I started the engine, my mother stepped forward. "Lily, wait," she said softly. "We really do love you." I looked at her, eyes steady, heart calm. "Maybe you do," I said. "But you'll have to learn that love doesn't wait for luxury cars to remember it exists." And with that, I shifted gears and drove away, the engine roaring like liberation. In the rearview mirror, I saw them standing on the driveway, small and still, watching me disappear down the street. That night, as the city lights reflected off the Porsche's hood, I realized something I never had before. Revenge wasn't about making them feel small. It was about feeling whole again. But just as peace began to settle in, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "We need to talk. It's about your inheritance." I stared at the screen, my heart skipping a beat. The past, it seemed, wasn't done with me yet.